Hi, Dilpreet. Welcome to the Trauma Safe Lab. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jen.
Yeah. Today we're going to talk about making the invisible visible, tracking dysregulation with data. And Dilpreet, you're at Philia Labs, the startup that you co-founded.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start with your story. What personal or professional experiences led you to focus your life's work on stress, emotional dysregulation, and mental health?
Thanks for having me, Jen. And it's definitely an appropriate question to start off with. So, I'm a biomedical engineer by background, and I've worked on building wearable sensors pretty much my whole career, starting with university in Germany and my first job in the Netherlands, and then my PhD in Australia. And during the PhD, we worked on a cuffless blood pressure sensor. So that's one of the holy grails of healthcare. But I finished that, and that went reasonably well with a couple of patent applications and some decent journal papers. But I became really fascinated with the idea of quantifying the body's chronic stress because it underpins so many health problems such as depression and anxiety and sleep issues. And you name the chronic disease that you have, stress is going to be the underlying component, or better put, chronic stress. So I started talking to quite a lot of people with the question, should stress be measured? And nobody said no. Let's put it that way. And, this was probably about 150 people, clinicians, human resource professionals, and just individuals in general. And then we started looking at different wearables to see what they're providing. And then we noticed, he means my co-founder Alex and I, we noticed a major gap in healthcare, at least, that everyone from clinicians to patients was struggling with subjectivity, where you basically have questionnaires and conversations around, how did you feel, what did you encounter, etc. And particularly the psychologists and psychiatrists that we talked to complain that they rely on mood and sleep diaries, but not everyone completes them. And it makes tracking progress almost impossible. On the other hand, autistic individuals that we talked to, they shared how hard it is to communicate their suffering, even to themselves. I can see that you're nodding your head over there because, you might resonate with this. People have to show even to themselves that they're actually suffering and they're not really sure if it's really a stress response or if it's just in their heads. The consensus was that everybody needed objective proof both for themselves and their healthcare providers to validate their need for help. And, at the same time, for people who are burning out, chronic stress can actually dull our own ability to sense whether we're actually chronically stressed or not. And that's why people often push themselves past their limits because their brains don't register how far along they are towards burnout. And that's what happened to Alex, my co-founder. And so Alex and I realized independently that biometric data can make the invisible visible. If there was a way to objectively track and demonstrate their physiological responses to stress, and whether that's emotional triggers or sleep disruption, it would be a game changer because firstly, people will realize it's not just in your head. And I know that the world has moved towards that point, but very often when we are isolated and chronically stressed, we question a lot or we stop questioning. Either way, it's a barrier for us to getting help. And what Alex and I truly believe is that having these objective measures would help people overcome a lot of obstacles to reaching out for help.
Yeah, that's a good.
I think another turning point came 6 years ago when we were actually studying wearables, and this metric called heart rate variability became extremely popular amongst wearables. One of the pioneers that I met in stress physiology, I met him when I had literally nothing, just a napkin idea. And this is somebody who's authored like over 100 papers on objective stress measurement, right? He agreed to see me in his office. And I was wondering, why would anybody do that? But it was a shot in the dark, and came back and I met him in his office. And it was an hour-long, you could say, complaint or a bit of a rant where he basically said, measuring heart rate variability alone is not enough to truly understand the body's stress response, because it measures a combination of the rest and digest and fight or flight activity. And a direct measure of the body's fight or flight activity would be a game changer because it truly allows us to see whether you're in fight or flight mode or not, as opposed to looking at the rest and digest. And so for us, that was a nice technical challenge because an objective measure of fight or flight activity in a wearable, it doesn't really exist. So Alex and I got really excited and we started working on it. And we did a couple of trials. And what we saw in one particular pilot study was that there was an intervention of 10 weeks. And many of the subjects had a somewhat lower level of heart rate variability. And there were a couple of subjects who did not show lower heart rate variability. Excuse me. There were a couple of subjects who across the intervention were supposed to show higher heart rate variability as a result of the intervention effect. So I apologize, Jen. I'm going too much into the technicalities.
No, do it. That's what we're here for. We want it. I want it all.
All good, all good. So basically, the intervention was supposed to improve their body's stress response. And that means that your heart rate variability is supposed to increase and your sympathetic arousal or your fight or flight activity is supposed to lower. Some of the subjects showed similar levels of heart rate variability. And then, that led us to question, is the intervention really working? But then when we looked at the sympathetic arousal, it actually lowered. And what we learned was that you have got to measure both in a healthcare intervention in order to truly holistically see whether the intervention, be it psychological or psychiatric or health coaching, it has got to result in people sleeping better and also having lower fight or flight activity when they sleep. And so we've seen this over and over again, this feedback from clinicians, and we've also heard from our early customers that they tell us it helps them tune into their internal cues, awareness. The one that really sparked us was that people said, I can see now finally that my emotional dysregulation, it's not just in my head, it's in my body.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And that sense of relief, or you could say relief, or just letting go all the years of shame that your stress responses in your body, it's not just in your head, that helped them so much to be able to more communicate, at least be willing to communicate that, hey, I'm not in a good state right now. Here's my wearable data. That keeps us going.
Yeah, because now you can finally track it over time and it tracks automatically, so you don't have to worry about manually putting it in a diary.
Absolutely, Jen. There's a lot of benefits there. The one that you named is an automated measurement that you basically put the wearable on during your sleep, and you can see I've not worn mine. I took it off when I got up. Oh, you've got yours on. Great. You put it on during sleep. It captures, sleep and stress are closely related, but the fact that it's automated means it's one less thing for both autistic adults and caregivers if there's a child involved. But the other thing is what the health professionals are telling us, that the fact that they have objective data to recognize and capture subtle improvements, that's super helpful for them because that's stuff that you cannot really capture during conversations. Oh, did you actually sleep 10 minutes more this week compared to last week? How are you supposed to track that?
Yeah, it's funny because as I'm tracking my data, some days I wake up and I'm like, I feel terrible. And I slept a total of maybe 6 hours, but it's like 2.5, 1.5. And then I woke up like 18 times. And I'm like, well, I guess cumulatively I slept fairly well, but the waking up constantly isn't helpful. So then I can show, like, yes, I was physically in bed 10 hours, right? Like 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. But I really only got a stretch of 2 hours. And how much deep or REM sleep can you even get at that point? So that was frustrating. So when I came across your startup, your product, right? It was you that I came across, right? One of your posts. I'm not even sure, I don't remember, but it just felt like I always knew you, right? Because I don't even remember like the first post that I saw. And I immediately knew, like, I have to get in touch with this person. Like, I have to somehow either be involved, get the wearable. Like, I just like need to, like, this is me, right? And I was so excited when you had also responded back to me, and then we started conversation, and then you let me be like essentially the first one to like purchase it in the
In the
US.
United States. Yeah.
Yeah. So that really meant a lot to me because you're right. I have all of those issues between my PTSD, my autism, stress scrambles your brain. We still don't know what am I in a burnout or what is this? Why am I not able to be functional? And then sometimes I can't think of words. Sometimes my brain goes blank. And so thought to myself, this is the wearable I need because I'm not being distracted. There's no notifications. Nobody's emailing me daily and sending, you didn't track your thing today. It's like I literally put it on and forget about it. It's so lightweight. It's sensory friendly. I mean, I don't even wear bracelets every day. And if I do, for sure, I'm taking them off when I get home. Like I'm not wearing them 24 hours or 23 hours a day like I'm wearing this. And I don't have to think about, is it working? It works. And then I don't have to think about what's my data because unless I'm feeling like I need to, like match it with my feelings or figure it out, I don't even need to look at it, right? Just open the app, make sure it's and just go back to what I'm doing. So for me, it has allowed me to communicate to my healthcare team,
Yeah.
communicate to other people, and communicate more importantly to the people close to me. Because now that I've been wearing this wearable and I'm sending this data to people that are, close in my life, they've actually stepped up naturally because they say, okay, well, once you can't argue with the data, right? Anybody can complain subjectively, but when you see the data, it's no longer a subjective complaint, right?
Yeah.
Now it's
Yeah.
objective. And so I guess just, I know you did cover it, but just to kind of like bring it back to the, non-clinical human customer or caregiver or provider that might be using it, right? What is biofeedback? How is it different from just wearing a fitness wear tracker?
This is a really interesting question because there's a fair bit of context involved. And I actually did some digging up into the history of biofeedback when I saw your question. Biofeedback is basically a technique that helps people understand and, more importantly, influence their body's response. And typically, it's been used in stress management. In the clinic, where traditionally you've got maybe an electromyograph sensor, or today in today's world, EEG or brain sensors, and they're typically in a session where there's a health professional involved, or some health materials involved. One good example is heart math, right? So in heart math, you can actually put on a sensor on your ear. You receive guided training to actually intentionally change your physiological response. And the key here is that you're observing and you're manipulating. And the goal is basically to learn to control your physiological functions by observing what a wearable sensor is measuring. And if I may flip this on a humorous note, a lie detector is also biofeedback in a way, except someone's being interrogated and someone else who's observing the person being interrogated actually makes a judgment as to whether they're getting anxious or not.
I would fail every test.
We probably would, right? I mean, I also would just get anxious about certain things as well.
Yeah.
But I think the point is observation and manipulation. And, then there's really a question, how is it different to wearing just a fitness tracker? Actually, that is a lot more nuanced, and you'll probably get 100 different answers what the difference is. I would say that looking at your fitness tracker and observing your tracker's metrics and even making lifestyle changes to change those metrics, to me, that is in a way biofeedback. It's just happening over a longer period. And that's probably a fundamental difference that wearables have enabled today, that you can record over a longer time. You can view, instead of viewing what your muscle tension or your respiration was in the last half an hour in the lab, you can actually view your step count or your sleep architecture, as you said, and you basically try out different things which might enable better sleep hygiene or or changing your sleep environment, or even consulting a health professional is a form of intervention, which should then lead to a metric that corresponds with better health. So I think the fundamental improvement that wearables have brought is that they enable us to measure more.
Right. And so, um, having this wearable, tracking this biofeedback, doing the changes, the tweaking, the manipulation, being able to feel empowered and advocating for support, that's already giving people a lot, right? And now they're able to put language to something that they didn't have before. And so one of the goals is to make the invisible visible, right? So what are some invisible signs of stress that your tech is helping people catch before it becomes a crisis? I know you touched on it before, but let's go into more detail.
This is a question that probably will get even longer answers compared to what we just talked. But I think let's talk about the definitions of stress first, because I think that's key.
Yes.
Stress has traditionally been quite a nebulous term in the layperson's world, but in the stress measurement world, there are some really good definitions that we found. And the first one I'd like to point out is momentary or acute stress. Say a lion or an alligator actually comes into the room and examines considers having you for dinner.
Yeah.
Your heart rate's going to change. Your muscles will be ready to either flee from the scene or fight if necessary. Your pupils will dilate. That's the body's fight or flight activity kicking in, and it results in an acute stress response or momentary. But imagine that the alligator comes into your room randomly for 6 months. You're going to be on a constant state of alert, right? And chances are that you're not going to recover enough in your room from the particular stressor because you're on constant alert whether the alligator is going to come today or not. And that means that the different organs of your body, they're operating in constant fight or flight mode, and there isn't enough resources that are diverted to rest and recovery.
Yeah.
So that's chronic stress, particularly if it's happening, according to one paper, if it's happening for more than 6 months, the exposure to the stressor. This is the really harmful. Yeah.
I wanted to add something. I really like that you used animals instead of people situations, because in hindsight, had you used human trauma, right? There's always a chance that I could be triggered, right? So using the animal one kind of took away that, I think, for me, and kind of allowed me to be more present for what you were describing. And then I think I'm very familiar with trauma and stress. I live it every day, but I like you said, if it happens one time, okay. If it keeps happening every day for 6 months and you're never able to relax, what you're also saying is the stressor could be the same, but if the duration of the contact or the internal dysregulation is like that, it doesn't matter what the animal is, essentially, right? If it's an ant, a mouse, a snake, a bear, right, a dragon, it's
whatever triggers you.
Causes you to be on alert, if it causes you to be dysregulated for an extended period of time, and it starts changing how you engage with your bedroom in that example, right? Or the room. And then it starts affecting other things. That's a trauma, right? So one big thing that I talked about in episode 1 is I don't really like the big T, little t. People say like there's the big trauma and the little trauma. I mean, that's just not possible, right? Because every trauma affects everybody different, especially if you don't have buffers immediately after it happens. And even when you have buffers, if it's not the right kind, and still it lingers. So there's no like big trauma, little trauma, right? And there's no trauma hierarchy, right? Like I went to war, so my trauma is worse than you having domestic violence trauma, right? It's like, it's still trauma.
Yeah. And this is a really, really good point, Jen, because one of the key things we picked up from our stress advisor was if there's an abstract model of stress, you could say that there's exposure to stresses, what's actually happening. And then there's the appraisal to stresses. What do you actually think or feel about them? How do you actually view an event? And then there's the response. So how's your body doing? Are you sleeping worse as a result of that stressor? Are you is your sympathetic arousal constantly elevated? Or in lay terms, is your resting heart rate elevated all the time? These three pillars are key because in interventions, an occupational therapist could actually look at the client's history and try to and understand, do some detective work to understand what actually happened. How did you actually view the event? Or even a psychologist for that matter. But the measurement, thank you, I got my morning coffee. They could look at the exposure, your appraisal of it, or even your family's appraisal of it for that matter. But the response is oftentimes limited to your subjective responses. But our vision is that by actually measuring your sleep patterns and your body's fight or flight and rest and digest activity patterns combined with other wearables, variables, it should actually be possible to quantify whether the help that you're getting is actually working for you, and if not, get something else fast, right? Because life is short for that matter.
Yeah, right. And trauma, once it hits, is long. It's long to undo. Once it gets past the 6-month mark, you're basically on then a long journey of trying to reverse and unwind it, right? So yeah, get the help fast. I agree.
And this is another place where we believe that wearable data can help, should help, is once you've been exposed to that event which caused trauma, which might cause a PTSD episode, it would be super critical to see if you're actually at risk for PTSD. And you could wear the device. Sorry, say somebody was exposed to a very violent event at the workplace. They decide to use a wearable to track what the changes in their sleep and stress response. The hope that we have is that, taking privacy into account, the hope that we have is that they will be empowered with more data to actually be able to definitive statement, hey, buddy, you might be at risk of PTSD. Might be a good idea for you to go visit a psychologist.
As much as we've talked and as much as I've obsessed about this wearable and data, I have never thought about using it that way. And that's so powerful, because then, to your point, it's like multifaceted, right? If it's happening in a workplace, then it could also prove, for lack of a better word, like workman's comp, or supporting evidence for a traumatic event in the workplace, right? So however that data is used, you can also use it to support your symptoms, right? And then to your point, if you get it early enough, right, like the day, around the same week or couple days that the incident happened, you'll see how you start maladapting to things that you normally didn't react that way to, right? Wow.
Thank you for that word, Jen. Maladapting. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right. Because that also makes me think of mothers having a baby. Your hormones are out of whack. If you breastfeed, they don't even normalize until 12 months after you stop breastfeeding. So why I'm saying that is postpartum depression is very traumatic. I mean, it's literally like life-altering situation, right? Like an emergency situation. And if new mothers wear this device, they can attempt to get ahead of some of those things, stay regulated, and get support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think for me, this is all probably biofeedback 2.0, if I may, where the intervention possibilities become much, much larger because you're able to measure much more and in your natural living environment. If you're at home or at the workplace, that's where you normally exist, and you're measuring on your terms. You're basically correlating events in your life to what you're measuring on a continuous basis. And indeed, is having people measure and own their data and understand their data to be able to seek help earlier, that's really at the core of what we do.
Right. So we're not just talking about people that have long-term chronic situations like PTSD and neurodivergence. We're also talking about situational events, right, that come and go in everybody's life. Nobody can escape it. Death, moving, marriage, childbirth, all of these major events that happen. We could start tracking how is it affecting the person, right?
Yeah.
Being a parent, being a teenager, all those events where it's like you get crazy or there's a big transition or period of adjustment and it
The
has the
life
purpose.
stresses.
Yeah. And like, we joke a lot on TikTok, like that's a core event. Usually it's used to reference like happy things, right? Like, but some core events also change your trajectory, right? So if you could
Yeah.
catch it ahead of time and not take that into a life that doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah. From my limited perspective, if you're able to see that you're headed towards maladaptive behavior, as you pointed out earlier, or you're headed into a spiral, the vision is that the data helps you capture a lot earlier, understand a lot earlier that I should go get help. And then you even have the data to document that you've documented. You have it to prove to somebody that you may be at risk of depression or anxiety, for example.
Yeah. And in the way you're describing it, it's because there's like a clear event that happened, right? And there are lots of like put a frog in water and boil it or whatever event where it's like the water's hasn't
Yep.
boiled yet and then they never jump out. So how to recognize the interesting thing would be how to educate or convince people that you don't have to wait until there's a known event because like you said, perspective of how they internalize it. There's lots of things I've experienced that I thought were like totally normal. And my husband's like, Jen, that is like not normal
Yeah.
what just happened. And I was like, "Oh, I didn't know. Right. So there's a lot of that goes on too. That would, I guess, be like Wearable 3.0, right? Convincing people to kind of use it without like a known kind of stressor or event and see, like in the example of giving birth, it isn't kind of a known stressor, but everybody manages it different, right? So we don't know where it's going to go. So I think in the case of we don't know where it's going to go, track it for a few months and see what
Exactly.
happens.
Exactly. Exactly. Track it, and once with the right data, it shall be possible to see whether you're coping well or you're headed towards a spiral.
Yeah.
And
Just treat it like a
simple.
blood pressure cuff or an insulin thing that maybe you do a spot check, but the spot check just lasts a little bit longer than the few minutes, right? It lasts a few months and then you put it away until you feel like you need to monitor again.
Absolutely, Jen. Thank you for bringing up glucose and blood pressure monitors because, this the value that they add is they're able to tell you whether you're headed towards an adverse
Yeah, effect.
event like a stroke or a heart attack or kidney damage. And
Yeah.
so, you change medication or lifestyle. It's the same for the body stress response or chronic stress or even life stressors, as you say.
Yep. Yeah. And once I understood that about your product, whatever that post was that I first saw, I immediately understood that. And I was like, I just have to get this. Okay. So
Thank you.
we'll switch a little bit away from the trauma and go more towards the neurodivergence. So you do work with neurodivergent individuals and caregivers. And I know your co-founder, Alex's brother is on the spectrum. And how does your technology support people living with autism or chronic anxiety and trauma?
It's a really good question. Basically, you're asking why we exist.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Basically, the first point is making the invisible visible. As we discussed early on in our podcast, many autistic people suffer from poor sleep. They also live with anxiety, and many autistic people also have something called poor interoception,
Mm-hmm.
which is for the layperson. So I did not know what interoception is before I went into autism. So for the benefit of the audience, interoception is basically the ability to sense what you're feeling. If you're feeling something. For a person with good interoception, if they're experiencing 40% momentary stress, they will roughly know that. If they're at 60%, they will also know that. And they will take measures to go back to 0 or 10%. For autistic people who have poor interoception, their challenge is it's hard for them to feel anything from 0 to 80%. And from 80 to 100%, then they will feel it and then they will respond. And oftentimes that means they're at boiling point. Which for the rest of the world, I would hope that I will make it my mission to work with health providers to educate the rest of the world that, when an autistic person is at 80%. They haven't sensed anything from 0 to 80, which is why it's impossible for them to communicate in a nice way that they're not doing okay. And they're not just having a tantrum or throwing a fit. It's not just a little tantrum or being petulant, but it's really their stress levels have been building up, but they just can't sense it inside.
Yeah.
And they need help with that.
Sorry, can we just take a second? Because like even hearing you say that, I'm just picturing the many, many, many times that has happened in my life. And I
I
just think it's
apologize if I triggered. Yeah.
no, it's fine. That's what this is for. Like, yes, I am feeling a little trigger, but still I want to go through this. I know I'm in a safe place, and I know you give me the space to keep myself like centered and focused. So, that's why I value you, and I'm glad you're an early guest on the show. But can you repeat all of that again? Because I think it's just literally like the crux of the whole disconnect between people who can understand that they're going from 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15%. Boom, I have to do something. And then you have people like me that'll literally be like 99 and I look like I'm holding it together. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I got to get out of here. And I'm just like full blown panic. And I'm like, where did that even come from? Like I thought I was fine. And all of a sudden I wasn't. Right. And it's, so can you just go and spend the extra time and repeat all of that again for us?
No problem. No problem at all. So, loosely spoken, many neurotypical people, their bodies are good at sensing the progression from, let's say, 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60%. And that allows them to do something about it. And traditionally, when they learn in schools, they learn how to, be nice, ask politely, and sometimes maybe take a breather, go and play, etc. And they're able to self-regulate, and the world is good again. Whereas for autistic people, they might not be able to sense anything from 0 to 80. And if you don't sense that you're anxious or if you need to go to the toilet, how are you supposed to do something about it?
Literally.
Right? You can only act on once you see information.
Yeah.
And so one of our advisors, her name's Emma Goodall, she did many years of research on improving your interoception. And I hope I'm giving justice to describing her work, but it was super critical. So interoception can be trained, but it does require, she joined us because she said the measurements that we're doing, they would be important in making, the invisible visible. So that autistic people can actually train themselves to, to some extent, maybe discover if you're between 0 and 40 or, 40 and 60. That's still better than not sensing anything from 0 to 80. And so going back to your question, how does the product help autistic people? One of the ways that we are working is to help people see what their dysregulation looks like in terms of their wearable data and what good moments look like. Or rather, good days and bad days. And that, at least at a macro level, it makes the invisible visible. So for example, if you've had fragmented sleep for the last 6 or 7 days, you're probably going to have a bad day on the 8th day. So, better do something about it. That's what the users are telling us, that they understand the relationship between external events and their body's stress and sleep a lot better.
So one example, how I used it is, I always say I'm running around the house all day, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything, right? And the tracker has proven I'm literally running around the house all day. I'm hitting 30 and 50,000 steps.
It's a lot.
Like, and I looked at the hours. I'm like, this can't be right. So I'm looking at hours for sure. I know I tried to sit down or, and it does show like changes, meaning so it's the right fluctuations are there when I know I'm running around and when I'm not. And so it's kind of like forced me to like sit, even though I don't, it's hard for me because I'm more of a fidgety anxiety person.
I hear you.
but I'm trying to manage it so I don't collapse, because the other side of that now is my nervous system is like a thermometer, right? Everyone's nervous system is like a thermometer, and my autonomic nervous system is broken, right? So now I was never regulating great, but I was still able to mask it. And now I just go in the collapse. So I can't even fight, flight, whatever. It's just like it's a collapse. So I haven't been able to really track the 20, 40, 60% yet, but I've been able to know that that if I do these things, eventually I'm going to hit the 80, 90. So it's kind of like allowing me to at least not do actions I know make me hit the 80, 90 until I can learn what the 20, 30, 40 feel like.
It's a start.
It's a start. And then when you add the PTSD on, PTSD trigger can shoot people without autism to 9 to 110 quick. So to
Yeah,
not even be able to recognize it or feel it, it's just, it's its own kind of suffering. And as a
it is.
trauma nurse, I learned that people can have locked in syndrome. They're effectively a quadriplegic. They can't move any body parts. Sometimes they can't even wrinkle, use the muscles in their nose or ears. They can't scratch and itch, but their mind is completely intact. And why I think that's important is because I've always related to that way before my diagnosis and everything. And I didn't really understand why, but now I know it's because I didn't have a lot of interoception, right? And it feels
Yeah.
like its own kind of locked in syndrome. Like I went to the doctor, my daughter had a meltdown at the mall. I tried to pick her up, so she doesn't hurt herself on the hard floor. And I was like, my shoulder hurts a little. Okay, I'm over 40, whatever. I go home and I'm like, my arm's frozen. Like I literally can't move my arm. Like it might be in dramatic, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I went, I got the imaging. I tore a part of my rotator, micro tears, but still tears in my rotator cuff. But here I am still trying to use my arm, walking around, like ignoring my pain
Yeah.
signals. And I broke my foot. I walked on it for 2 months without recognizing like, hey, maybe you should get that checked. I gave birth to a kid without pain medicine. And it's not that the pain wasn't there. It's just like I don't even know to stop and point to it. I don't know to stop and
Yeah.
tell somebody. And then when I have to describe it, I'm a nurse. I mean, I was a nurse. I don't work as a nurse anymore, but I have clinical
You have a
training and
nursing background. Yep.
I have no language for my own pain. I know what the options are. You can show me the list. You could show me the
Yeah.
smiley faces and the grimaces, and still I can't tell you. It's almost like I'm a child where I'm like, this, something's going on here. It's almost like I'm
Yeah.
afraid to, like, I can't even name it. It's like I can't even say pain. Is it burning? Is it this? I don't know. It's just something's not right. That's as far as like I can tell people.
It
Ugh,
definitely. Firstly, hats off
yeah.
to you for how you carry on with life,
It's
fulfilling all your responsibilities despite the challenges that you face.
Yeah, sometimes it gives me like kind of ignorance in a way where it's like I could still keep going, but really the long-term effects has been what I'm experiencing the last 7 years, which is like not being able to be functional. And so I guess, I'm thinking like, what are the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to manage the stress? Because without understanding what their body's actually signaling, I'm sure we make a lot of mistakes in the process. And what do some of those mistakes look like?
So I'd be very hesitant to use the word mistake.
Sure.
I'd
Yeah, that's
say, if I may say, what do
guided.
people struggle with? Um, where could they, get some help so that they can start playing to their strengths? Um,
Mm,
so, from the perspective of, stress exposure, appraisal, and measure and response, you could say that your rotator cuff injury would be an event. You were exposed to it uh, because of the way your body is wired differently. Your appraisal of the rotator cuff would be very different to perhaps your neighbor, who I assume would be neurotypical, and they might be able to go to the doctor and scream, "Oh my God, I tore my rotator cuff." Right? So I think the first struggle is what we discussed in the previous question, which is how do I work with my interoception skills? There's some autistic people who have really good interoception and they don't struggle with this. But for those who do, I'd say interoception, misinterpreting interoception is a big challenge. And when we can't accurately interpret what our body is telling us, we lose valuable information about our stress levels. So we don't get help in time. Um, and that, so I'll just stick to the challenge, if I may, rather than talking about solutions. Is that okay? I'd say the second struggle is, once you've actually sensed that something is wrong, it's important to acknowledge a stressor and what its impact is on us. So, for example, if, the alligator is coming in and considering you for lunch, sounds like a stupid, obvious example, but it's okay completely to say, hey, that thing really freaks me out and I got to do something about it. As opposed to saying, no, it's okay. I'm sorry to use the masculine term. Let me just man up and take it. It's not okay to do that. It's better, in my opinion, to say, hey, that's really having an effect on me. What do I do about it? Because once you've reached that acknowledgement stage, then it becomes a lot easier to get help, whether it's self-help or from somebody else.
Okay, so now that you gave that example again after a lot of this conversation, I kind of reframed it in my brain as Dilpreet's given me permission that when an alligator comes in the room, I don't even have to know the alligator's intentions. I don't have to wait until he metaphorically puts on the napkin on his shirt and breaks out the fork and knife. If I just feel like this is not for me, I don't like this, I don't have to think past that. I can stop there and I can take an action, whether I'm right or wrong. I can remove myself or some other kind of thing that I can do to make myself not even think
Feel
about
safe.
the alligator. Yeah, feel safe, right? And so hearing you describe that, I visualize the alligator kind of coming in the room and for some reason, like in a bed. And then I'm just kind of like, that's like a 0 to 20 range, right? The fact that you open the door and now you're fully in my room. That's kind of like a 50. So I feel like you're giving me an opportunity to kind of like quantify an event, right? And so maybe now going forward, I'll try to add, I guess in a way, arbitrary numbers to it and then just fine tune it as I go. And at some point give myself permission that 1%, 10%, 11, they're all worthy of an action. I don't have to wait for it to get to 60, 70, 80% dysregulation before I take action. I'm allowed to make myself feel safe the second it increases past 0. The second those changes, to make kind of like relatable to like the wearable and the data, the second any of those markers change, I don't have to wait for my respirations to go from 18 to 26. If it's like 18 to 20, as minor as it may seem, right, that's still like a 12% or whatever increase, right? That's an increase.
Absolutely. And that's, if I put things together, a meltdown to some extent, as I understand from the literature, and I'd be happy to stand corrected, but emotional dysregulation, it actually happens as a result of prolonged fight or flight activity. And that's why stopping that increase in fight or flight activity in its tracks before you hit a meltdown, that acknowledgement step allows you to stop yourself from going from maybe 20 to 40. I forgot the numbers that you mentioned, but I think something like that.
I read the book, The Bagel Theory, right? And that was after my diagnosis. It was like so eye-opening because there's a lot of visuals I was able to create based on how it was worded. But, I think there's an illustration or whatever in there where it's like, this is like your normal range, right? And you don't have to, even though you're still in the normal range, if you're at the top of the normal range, just like with blood pressure, just like with blood sugar, just like with emptying your bank account, right? You don't have to wait till the bank account's like 0, right? If you know it's increasing or decreasing to the lower or higher end of normal, right? Then you can take action. You don't have to wait till it's on or over the line.
And for us, this is a problem that we are hell-bent on solving. For chronic stress, which is correlated with emotional dysregulation and which leads to anxiety and depression. The current standard of measurement is questionnaires and cortisol levels. And even in cortisol levels, it's hair or saliva or blood. Salivary cortisol levels are, at least to my understanding, more of a research tool than clinical practice because they're expensive and there's a lot of context involved. You have to measure in the morning, etc. Questionnaires are standard, but they suffer from recall bias or even falsification bias. That's the technical term. What it really means is people either forget certain events or they're not able to express themselves in the moment, or they do not want to express themselves. And so the scores will be skewed as a result. And so what's really missing is in mental health and stress-related interventions is a quantifiable and benchmarkable measure of chronic stress that is linked to health outcomes. Systolic and diastolic blood pressure are linked to stroke and heart attacks and kidney damage, or blood glucose level for that matter. And so, for us, this is a 20-year endeavor to continuously develop these algorithms that will be compatible with any wearable and work with the researchers and clinicians to, over time, establish those benchmarks. Because what it also does is enable better interventions then.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We all need that, especially related to stress, because stress affects everybody. You don't have to be neurodivergent. You don't have to have trauma. Stress affects your body. It lingers, shows up places that, answers and everything. So what advice would you give someone who says like I feel overwhelmed all the time, but nothing's showing up on the surface? I look normal. I'm masking well. It hasn't hit me yet. I haven't felt the impact of the stress, but I'm overwhelmed.
Probably the first thing I would say is find what breathing techniques really work for you and use, regardless of what wearable you're using, do a spot check of 3 minutes and try things like balloon breathing, box breathing. Those will get you calmer in that moment. The second one would be to consider tracking patterns around when you feel most overwhelmed. Is it related to certain times of the day or activities or social contexts? So identifying these patterns can help you understand the relationship between what's happening and outside and what's happening in your body. And therefore, you'd learn over time what puts you in a good state and what puts you in a bad state. And basically repeat the good behaviors. I mean, I'm actually quoting an autistic person that we spoke to. They'd use the data to repeat good behaviors that help them get into a better state, and they'd avoid situations or behaviors that put them in a worse state. It's hard work, but it is our life after all, and we all deserve to create a good life and should use whatever tools are at our disposal.
Yeah, because I feel like the alternative, when you just described that person and how they use it, is normally you would call your friend, your sister, your spouse, right? And yes, that in effect is their role, their job. They want to do that. They love you. But there's also something to be said about being able to do it yourself and feeling like, if I can, I will. And we are built like that. If we don't have the tools, if we don't have the knowledge, sometimes we are helpless and we do need that support. But if we can be empowered to do it ourselves, pretty much everybody will do that, right? And we don't have to put it on other people to tell us. We can actually tell them, and then we can educate them on how to support us. So, for me, it was a long period of educating my husband on how to support me, because he just didn't understand sometimes how a loud noise outside might make me feel anxious for 2 days. I didn't understand it either. I didn't want to feel like that either, right? So if that person has already been empowered to focus on the positive, that's amazing. I give that person a lot of credit. I'm not there yet, but it has empowered me on how to get people to support me differently and not put the burden on them, right? Because there was a long period of time where my mother-in-law came to stay, right, when I had cancer last year, and we went to a store, because I can't usually go to a store by myself. She goes to the store with me, and then she wanted to go to another store. But then she said, you know what, Jen, you can't do 2 stores. I'm like, what do you mean? I could go, I'll drive, let's go, blah, blah, blah. She's right. Because if I go to that second store, I'm too anxious, I'm too tired, my my foot hurts, my hips are like, you name it, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
I get dysregulated. So they were able to start pointing those patterns out for me. So now that I have the wearable, I could start associating those patterns that they first told me about. It's basically a list, right? Like, where do you
Yeah.
start? If you have interoception problems, you can have the wearables and the data and work backwards, or you can listen to what people have been telling you or what their reactions are in certain situations, and then you can also work forward, right? So there's lots of different ways to kind of come into yourself and support yourself too, and then educate the people around you on how to support you, because just like you teach somebody how to work with your kid when you take them to the daycare, well, they like their napkin folded in half, they want their banana peel on, like,
Yeah.
cut the crust off, like whatever it is, like that's what we as people, and especially people that struggle with interoception, neurodivergence, PTSD, it falls on us to educate those around us. And this, wearable adds that other objective layer.
It does indeed, because you're basically coming up with that list of what works for you and what doesn't. And that's something that you can share with your near and dear ones, so that they understand how to better support you.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? After having this, we have a lot of conversations, but after having this one, I feel like I almost want to make a list of like, what do I do in a normal day,
Yeah.
period, right? Like maybe track my activities over like a week or two, and then maybe start assigning some kind of something to it, either a value or and then, because there are things that I do, right? That's objective. I'm doing this, right? I'm sitting here, I'm cooking breakfast, I'm standing in the kitchen, not eating when I'm hungry, right? Like whatever those things are that I'm doing, maybe I should start tracking them, because then I could start associating.
Absolutely. Actually, I think Alex would have spoken to you about that 30-day report, and adding the second layer on top, which is what events did you encounter and what your appraisal of those events was. And then you can start to see cause and effect.
But I think when we think of events, where we are taught or groomed even to see events as what majority of people would see as an event. And that
I,
event is different for everybody, sometimes, every day, right? And so
oh, absolutely. I apologize. Sorry.
yeah, no, it's good. No, don't apologize, because we need this dialogue, right? Because other people have it in their heads, and maybe even I had it in mine. But now that we can talk it out, if the interoception training and associating the biofeedback and the wearable, right? It's like, what is an event? Maybe I think is really what we're talking about, right? We're talking about,
That's a good question.
you have to actually acknowledge an event is happening. Some of us are not even there yet, right? So track what it is you're doing, right? As best
Yep.
you can. And that could just be like getting in the car, going here, doing this, getting dressed, right? And then start attaching the data during that hour, right? And then you could see what is an event, right? Because at one point, just brushing my teeth and getting dressed felt like it took my entire day's energy. That was an event for me, which for most people it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you. I'd agree. The event can also include stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, it could just be simple everyday stuff, because it affects everybody differently. So we don't even know what that is. So let's start labeling it, right?
Yep.
Okay, if somebody would wanted to begin using biofeedback today, what's a simple, affordable way to start noticing their own nervous system patterns? Kind of touched on it just now, but what do you say to that?
Quite a lot. I'll start with what the existing wearables can do, and then what we at Philia Labs want to do. Would that be okay? So I think there's plenty of smartphones and smartwatches that offer heart rate and heart rate variability tracking. They're a really good entry point. What we'd recommend is use consistent times during the day. For example, once you've woken up, that's a really good time to measure your resting heart rate and variability, because your body's supposedly recovered from last night's sleep. Keep tracking that over time, because then you'll be, and log, what things like what stressors happened in the previous day. Did you do anything extraordinary? That will help you already to start tracking what's happening in your life versus how your body is responding.
Correlating.
They've definitely broken a lot of ground here. I'd say what we are working on is in the moment when you're measuring with a breathing app, you might be measuring your resting heart rate and it goes down. That allows you to roughly see the effects of the breathing technique, for example, that you're doing. For people with chronic stress or autonomic, nervous system dysregulation, that response may not be the same. And so what we are working on is measuring both your rest and digest and your fight or flight activity in the moment to be able to see what the interaction is between the two. We did not actually go into this, but imagine that your body is a car and the accelerator and the brake are the car's stress response. So the accelerator would be, when you're experiencing stress, you ram the accelerator or you gently press on it, depending on, and that's your response to the stressor. And when it's time to rest and recover, you apply the brakes, right? The challenge with people who are chronically stressed is that both the accelerator and the brake are being pressed at the same time. That's pretty much invisible.
That's how it feels.
And that's what we're measuring. We're actually measuring both so that you can actually see whether you're letting go of the accelerator or not. And that's not something that heart rate will tell you. It's not something that heart rate variability will tell you, but it is something that measuring the body's sympathetic arousal or fight or flight activity will tell you.
Yeah. I'm just taking a moment here to digest all of that, because normally if you're in a car and you try to push both of those at once, you don't know what outcome you're going to get. Is the car going to go or is the car going to stop, right? And
Exactly.
it's not doing
Exactly.
what it's supposed to do in either way, in either, yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I personally was struggling to articulate that, but yeah, pressing the brake and the accelerator at the same time, it's not going to lead to a good outcome. At least I can't think of any.
And a lot of times, that's when you can even get, there's fight or flight, but really there's like four, right? Fight, flight, freeze, fun. And in that situation, it's almost like a freeze or a collapse, right? Where you can dissociate, where you're not present, you can't take action. It's not an actionable place to be in life.
Absolutely. And from the perspective of the polyvagal theory, if you're in anxiety or in a really bad emotional state, chances are you're not switching enough between the rest and digest and the fight or flight mode. Being able to measure the two concurrently and independently will allow people and even health practitioners to be able to see how autonomically flexible you are. And these are not my words. These are actually the words of the pioneer of the polyvagal theory, Professor Porges. So from that perspective, it's super important to be able to see how much you're switching. And then there's also the autonomic space. Many people think that your fight or flight and rest and digest, it's a seesaw. Yeah. So if one is going up, the other is going down. That's what heart rate variability largely assumes. That if your heart rate variability is going up, you're going down on the seesaw. Rather, if your heart rate variability, which is this side, or your rest and recovery mode is going up, it's like this, right? And it means that your fight or flight is going down. The autonomic space says that it's not just a seesaw, but the two are also moving up and down together. And that's why you need to be able to track the two so that you can see whether you have something like this. Is it a dynamic response or is it more of a dampened response here? And if it's a dampened response, you're actually chronically stressed.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to try to put this in my lived experience, okay? My daughter has a very long meltdown. She's crying for what seems like forever, and I'm dysregulated. And it might take me going off in a room and laying down in the dark or taking a bath, whatever it is I have to do, right? Self-care to try to get close to not feeling like I'm off my rocker, right? And my husband, I might not have any, I might not even look like I'm responding. I might just go and do what I have to do. And to somebody else, it might look like nothing, right? And my husband, he might, have a reaction, an appropriate, parent reaction to our daughter, and then he'll just immediately, forget about it and go on with his day, make the chai,
Yeah.
give her a bath, play with her, do whatever. And I'm just like, how are you just so normal right now? Like, I am not,
Yeah.
normal. So his response, even though, for example, like bipolar, right? If you have labile responses, people think something's wrong. We're not talking about labile emotional responses, right? We're talking about flexible nervous system responses, which is totally different, right? If your body is saying stress, 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 it naturally should bring itself down in a healthy
Yeah.
adaptive time frame, right? Like
Yeah.
a thermometer brings the temperature down in your house, right? When you turn up the AC, or technically turn down the AC, right? And he's able to, essentially do that. Whereas mine goes up and it just takes so long. And sometimes if we have repeated days of certain things going on or certain behaviors, which are totally normal in kids, I have never reached the regulation
Yeah.
phase yet to even be there a lot of times to co-regulate even with her, right? Because I'm still trying to regulate myself.
Yeah. And I can,
Yeah, I would say like never, with autism, there's a lot of things like, well, we don't see hierarchies or jealousy or like things like that. But for sure, I didn't have words for it back then, but I'm for sure notice when people, the way I differentiate is like regulated and unregulated people. And so when I meet people and I know they're calm and regulated and just like kind of methodical, sounds a little bit mechanical, but just
no, it's spot on.
they're hearing their thoughts, they're feeling their feelings, they're in tune with everything. I am, I don't know if even jealous is the right word, but I do feel like a longing to feel like that. Like I want to feel like that. And
It's an ambition.
yeah, because in periods or times where I have had that for however short it was, I was like, man, if I could feel like this every day, like I would just be
Yeah.
like unstoppable, right?
This is really fascinating, and I wish Emma Goodall, our advisor, was here, the one who developed the Interoception training kit, because
We should have her on actually.
I'll talk to her. For me, training interoception may well be the tip of the iceberg, because if you're able to train autonomic flexibility, and there's a therapist that we work with, she developed her own therapy that promotes this.
Oh,
If there was a way to measure, we're a biomarker company in that sense. For us, being able to measure the effects of different interventions and see which intervention works for you so that you're in that regulated state. That would help so many people be in that calm state where they can, just live their lives and get stuff done. That is also what drives us over here, that if we are able to measure that, during interventions, we think it's going to create a lot of human impact.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm totally bought into it. And so I think, maybe this is not known yet, or maybe this is too technical, or maybe I'm just too desperate for a solution. But okay, the one guy that does the wearable, you said he now more focuses on the things that are good, right? That keep him regulated.
Yeah.
And we're using the word avoid in a more of minimizing way versus like avoiding way, right? Because you need a level of stress to work the muscle. And now that we discussed that it's more like this versus like this, like the bar going up and down versus the seesaw, just because there's an audio only component to the podcast. So I want to kind of describe that. I'm sure some people are going to want to focus on one side versus the other, right? So my husband might be like, I want to work on all the good stuff, whereas I'm like, I got to fix the bad stuff first, right?
Yeah.
What do you say, I guess, kind of to that for the new person that's getting started, that's like, wow, this is empowering. Like, I want to try it out. What do I work on first? Or how to think about what to work on, And if that's not something like we directly have an answer for now, I know for sure you're going to come back on another episode and we can work this out then too, because I think that's kind of the key for adoption and getting people to really own their nervous system health.
Yeah, but to still attempt to answer your question, Jen, I would say find out what works best for you. If you're comfortable with working on your strengths, do that. If you prefer to work on your weaknesses now, fine, do that, because it's a journey. At a certain point, you may reach the level where you say, hey, what about my strengths? Or
Yeah,
vice versa. So
that's funny because I feel like my husband Vivek would give the same answer. Basically, just do it because
just
you're
do
going to end up
something.
having to work on both.
Yeah,
Just get in the game, basically. So I
get in the
guess
game. Yeah.
this is my call to action for everybody listening. Anybody who has stress, which if you're listening to this podcast, you either have the stress or you work with people that have the stress. And, let's get everybody some help and
100%.
get everybody connected with the inside, make it visible.
Make it visible indeed, so it's manageable, or yeah,
Like Nike has just do it. You have make it visible.
make it visible, or maybe just measure it. It's
Just measure it.
it's really interesting. The founder of Nike, Phil Knight, he is such an inspiration for us because he was just driven by the mission to make running accessible to everyone. And
Yep.
for us, it just inspires us so much because we also want to make stress measurements accessible to everyone, whether it's the individual or the healthcare provider.
Oh, I like that.
Very glad you mentioned it. Thank you.
I actually read the book and watched, the movie, so I'm on board with that for sure. All right. I don't have any other way to end it because I'm just kind of awkward sometimes with this, but I appreciate you being on my show. I always like hearing from you. I like learning how people think of stress, biofeedback, and tools, technology that we can use. And do you want to add anything else before we finish?
I just want to say Alex and I feel really fortunate to be able to work with you, Jen and Vivek. So thank you for also having us on this podcast.
Feeling is mutual.
Thank you.